There would be few people in the country who would argue against the fact that Mini is one of the most iconic and recognisable brands around. Kicked off in 1959, the Mini started out as a model produced by the British Motor Corporation and didn't become a marquee in its own right until 1969. The original Mini was both legendary and innovative, pioneering the use of a transverse engine layout with front-wheel drive to give vastly superior packaging advantages in terms of passenger space. Powertrains range from an 848cc up to the iconic 1275cc 1.3i found in the later Cooper models. The original model was so successful in fact that it lasted right through until the very end of the 20th century with relatively little change at all. Throughout that time, the car was marketed under several brands with names including the Austin 7, the Morris Mini Minor and then just Mini. In addition, there were also various spin-offs using the same basic body under the British Motor Corporation, such as the Wolseley Hornet, the Mini Moke, and the Morris Mini Traveller. The Mini quickly became a cultural and technological icon, ranging from the star of the swinging 60s to successfully competing in the Monte Carlo Rally, winning in the years 1964, 65, and 67. Towards the end of its life in the 80s and 90s, the Mini's image shifted towards being a fashion statement with various special editions making it a retro throwback rather than a cutting-edge modern design. It was arguably this newfound shift towards being a fashion icon that helped secure the future of the Mini brand heading into the 2000s. In 1994, what was left of the British Motor Corporation, then just called Rover Group, was bought out by BMW. The purchase didn't last long though, as BMW proceeded to sell off most of the Rover Group in 2000. Crucially, however, they saw value in the Mini brand and held on to the rights to build vehicles using the Mini branding. It was this decision that secured Mini's future for the 21st century, just as the Rover Group was dying off under flawed ownership by the Phoenix Consortium. In late 2000, the Mini was completely reborn for the 21st century. At the same time, the design was one that was very familiar and faithful to the original 1959 model. Designer Frank Stevenson talked about having to keep the spirit of the original whilst being a lot more advanced.
So what I tried to do with the concept of the new Mini was to keep this feeling of a very compact car on the outside by reducing the front overhang and the rear overhang. And if you studied the proportions of the Mini from a side view aspect, you would realize it was actually sort of like a three-tiered cake. You would have the roof, you would have the glass, and the body was a third element. So in my view, it's pretty much like a three-tiered cake.
The models range from the basic one, the mid-range Cooper, and topped off with the sporty Cooper S. Over time, variants including cabrios and sporty JCW GP editions emerged too. The second generation was introduced in 2006 and followed the same ethos of "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" that Mini became famous for over the decades. Only minor tweaks were made to the exterior and the interior was modernised to stay competitive in the premium Super Mini sector. It was in this generation where BMW diversified the Mini range dramatically, with the inclusion of the Clubman, the Countryman, the Roadster, the Paceman and the Coupe, in a hope to reach out to more consumers. Mini today is led by Bernd Korber. He was appointed the role only last year but has been a part of the Mini brand management since 2003. The lead designer of the brand today is Oliver Halmer. In an interview with Business Leader, he had this to say about how he perceives the Mini brand. To me, Mini embodies a confident and modern attitude far removed from luxury in sheer size. It doesn't matter how exclusively or expensively equipped a Mini is, it is always compact on the outside. In my eyes, this shows that people who drive a Mini do so for their own enjoyment. Of course, they want to be distinctive and express their personality through their car to a degree, but they do that through the inner values of the car. In my view, Mini is classless in how it achieves this. And then you have to bear in mind that many Mini customers have a unique and profound connection with their cars. Mini is a very emotional brand, and you don't find that very often in this form in the car world. Mini very much sits as a branch of the BMW tree trunk. BMW, currently led by Oliver Zipser, is one of the largest manufacturers in the world, and the Mini brand benefits by sharing parts and technology that have been subject to millions upon millions of euros of research and development. In fact, if you climb into a Mini today, you will recognise the chimes, you will recognise the reskinned iDrive system, and you may even recognise the same 1.5 litre 3-pot engine found in the BMW i8. This platform sharing exercise is part of a wider industry movement that manufacturers across the world are partaking in order to drive up efficiency and profit margins. Volkswagen is perhaps the most famous example, where the platform for its Touareg also makes up the Audi Q7, the Bentley Bentayga, the Porsche Cayenne, and even the Lamborghini Urus. Today's Minis follow a similar principle. The 5-door hatchback, for example, shares the same platform and engines as today's BMW 1 Series. The model range of the Mini brand continues the diversification that the second generation kicked off. Today, you can walk into a dealership and drive out in a 3-door hatch, a 5-door hatch, a convertible, the Clubman, or the Countryman. The increased product range compared to the first generation of BMW Mini is primarily aimed at driving up sales figures, as previously mentioned. On the face of it, this strategy has worked well. Sales were 216,000 for 2009, where the range was still relatively basic, but this increased to 347,000 a decade later in 2019. Offering different models in different vehicle segments means reaching out to more potential customers. However, sales are declining. They peaked in 2017 with 372,000 models shifted. Part of this can be arguably attributed to the fact that the current generation is quite old now. It was launched in 2014 after all, and many fresher models from alternative brands have been released since then. Under BMW ownership, Mini has firmly placed itself as a premium manufacturer. When the first generation launched in 2000, the idea of a premium Super Mini was almost non-existent, and the Mini has been credited in the past in creating the segment all by itself. Bearing that in mind, the main competitors to the Mini is not so much Super Minis such as the standard Vauxhall Corsa or Ford Fiesta, but more fashion conscious choices such as the DS3, VO500 or the Audi A1. Larger variants such as the 5-door hatch and the Clubman compete with other premium brands, with examples being the Mercedes A-Class, BMW's own 1 Series or the Audi A3, and the compact SUV Countryman competes with the ever-crowded segment, which includes models such as the Nissan Qashqai, BMW X1 and VW Tiguan. Mini today very much carries on the reputation it built up in the 80s and 90s as a manufacturer that puts fashion and style before anything else. A typical driver of a Mini would put sportiness and fun before practicality. The cars are purposefully different with the styling and small touches, with examples being the frameless windows found in most models, definitely unusual in the Super Mini segment, playful LED lighting in the interior and particularly on the dashboard, and sport mode claiming to offer maximum go-kart feel. The Mini also keeps being British at the heart of its identity, with things such as the Union Jack taillight design, despite essentially these days being completely German. The image is a purposeful one built by BMW to stay consistent with what made the original model so popular, with its small dimensions and excellent handling characteristics. After all, sporty driving is arguably the core of the Mini DNA. Anything has its own strengths and weaknesses, and the Mini is no exception to that rule. Let's start with a few key strengths with the brand as it is today. Mini is strong for its individualism. In a world where people and journalists often complain about cars looking the same and being slightly boring, Mini definitely carves its own path, even if it does come at the expense of practicality at times. This arguably doesn't matter though, as the typical Mini customer is more fashion conscious and values sporty driving over the average driver. Mini is also in an arguably stronger position now than it was in a decade or so ago, with the aforementioned broader portfolio and higher sales figures. Finally, the brand, much like BMW itself, benefits from having quite a loyal fan base who do a lot of the marketing for them through word of mouth. There are several active forums online dedicated to Mini, and there is a strong aftermarket parts scene. As for weaknesses, currently the brand sales are falling at quite an alarming rate in some areas. In the US, for example, sales year on year from December 2018 to December 2019 fell 40%. Part of the reason is an aging lineup, but a lot can be put down, rather ironically, to the thing that drove up sales in the first place, the product diversification. According to Richard Truett from Automotive News, modern Minis are further from the DNA that made them special in the first place. In other words, BMW have strayed far away from the original ethos, with the current model being not very Mini at all, and the Countryman the butt of many jokes about the name of the company. Fans of the first-gen BMW Mini are often lukewarm in reception to the current range, with its divisive looks and dimensions. Mini also struggles with reliability in some models, with the R56 Cooper S a particular nightmare of its timing chain, and parts aren't cheap thanks to BMW parts bin sharing. So with sales falling and the model lineup getting old, where does that leave Mini going into the future? Part of the answer has already arrived with the recently announced Mini Electric. Launched as a hot hatch S model, it aims to rekindle the love of driving Minis with instant torque, and even going as far as putting a relatively small 32 kWh battery pack in the name of saving weight and not losing the go-kart handling cliche. More electric models are expected in the next few years, which will be crucial in the survival of the brand. Mini also reportedly has 2 SUV models in the pipeline in order to try and improve sales. Whether that will continue to push away traditional fans does, however, remain to be seen. The 4th generation hatchback is not due now until 2023, and it could be produced under partnership between BMW and Chinese manufacturer Great Wall in further attempts to save costs with platform sharing. The new generation is also expected to shrink in size, which would address some complaints from fans who claim the current F56 generation is not mini enough for a Mini. However, there are rumours the 3-door model disappearing completely. It seems then that the future of Mini will be a rollercoaster of emotions for fans of the brand across the world as BMW restructures in order to stay competitive and profitable in an ever-changing industry environment. The hard truth is that small cars are unfavoured these days thanks to changing consumer habits and tough new EU fleet emission rules that effectively penalise small cars with basic engines. For Mini to survive, it may well have to become a completely different beast to John Cooper's iconic original.